My husband's family mocked my cooking and refused to eat my food until they found out who owned their favorite restaurant. The first time I met Jake's mother, Beverly, she hugged me with the enthusiasm of someone embracing a cactus. Her smile never quite reached her eyes as she looked me up and down, clearly tallying invisible demerits against some unspoken standard I'd already failed to meet. "So you're the one who's captured our Jake's heart," she said, her voice dripping with the kind of sweetness that leaves a bitter aftertaste. "We've been so looking forward to meeting you." Jake squeezed my hand. "Mom, Emily's an amazing cook. Wait until you try her food." The slight tightening around Beverly's mouth told me everything I needed to know. In the Thompson family hierarchy, the kitchen was her domain, a territory not to be encroached upon. "Is that so?" she replied, patting my arm. "How interesting." That first dinner at their sprawling suburban home set the tone for every family gathering to follow. The Thompson family operated like a well-oiled machine, with Beverly as both conductor and critic. Lauren, Jake's younger sister, watched her mother's every reaction before forming her own opinions. His father Robert followed Beverly's lead with the practiced ease of a man who'd long ago decided domestic peace was worth more than independent thought. I'd spent days planning that first meal I'd bring to their weekly Sunday dinner. A delicate mushroom risotto with fresh thyme and truffle oil, paired with a slow-roasted chicken that had been marinating for 24 hours in a blend of herbs I'd perfected over years. "It's a bit unconventional," Beverly commented after taking a single, small bite. She placed her fork down with the careful precision of someone handling evidence at a crime scene. "We typically prefer traditional recipes in this family." Lauren, emboldened by her mother's dismissal, pushed her plate away. "It's so heavy on the garlic. And what is this flavor? It's so foreign." "Truffle," I supplied, feeling the heat rising to my cheeks. "It's just a hint of truffle oil." "Well," Robert chimed in, clearing his throat, "not everyone can be expected to understand proper seasoning right away." Jake jumped to my defense, but his words felt hollow against the unified front of his family's disapproval. I sat there, smile frozen on my face, nodding as Beverly launched into a lengthy explanation of how we do things in this family, complete with anecdotes about Jake's childhood favorites that apparently I should have somehow intuited. This became our ritual. Every Sunday, I would arrive armed with a new dish, hoping this would be the one to crack their armor. And every Sunday, they would find something wrong.
Too salty.
Too bland. Too exotic. Too simple. The goalposts weren't just moving, they were disappearing altogether. 6 months into my marriage, I discovered their obsession with Willow and Thyme, an upscale fusion restaurant that had become the darling of the local food scene. Beverly couldn't contain her excitement as she described their recent visit. "The chef there is a genius," she gushed, eyes bright with genuine admiration, an expression I'd never once seen directed at anything I'd created. "The way she balances flavors, it's like she understands what people truly want to eat." Lauren nodded enthusiastically. "Mom's been trying to recreate their signature glazed duck for weeks." Without success, Beverly admitted with a self-deprecating laugh that somehow managed to sound humble and superior at the same time. Some people just have that special touch in the kitchen. I nearly choked on my water, fighting back a hysterical bubble of laughter that threatened to expose everything. If only they knew that the special touch they so admired belonged to the very woman they were currently dismissing. Willow and Thyme was mine. Well, half mine. My creation, my recipes, my vision, brought to life with my best friend Natalie. And not one person at this table had the slightest clue. The irony was almost too perfect. Beverly, who found my cooking too experimental, was paying premium prices for those exact same experiments across town. The glazed duck she couldn't recreate? I developed that recipe in my tiny apartment kitchen 3 years ago, perfecting it over dozens of iterations until the balance of sweet, savory, and tangy achieved that precise moment of culinary harmony. At home that night, Jake wrapped his arms around me as I washed dishes with more force than necessary. "Don't let them get to you," he whispered against my hair. "They're just set in their ways." I leaned back against his chest, wondering how to explain that their rejection wasn't just about food. It was about belonging, about worth, about being seen. Your mom mentioned making reservations at Willow and time for your dad's birthday next month, I said instead, keeping my voice casual. Jake groaned. I know. It's all they talk about lately. Mom's convinced she's going to charm the secret recipe for their famous chocolate souffle out of the staff. I bit my lip to stop from smiling. That souffle, with its cloud-like texture and hidden core of salted caramel, had taken me nearly 30 attempts to perfect. The secret ingredient was patience, something Beverly Thompson had yet to show toward me. Week after week, they raved about Willow and time while picking apart my cooking. The restaurant became their measuring stick for culinary excellence, a standard they reminded me I could never hope to achieve. Maybe you should eat there sometime, Beverly suggested one Sunday after declaring my paella interesting but not quite right. Her tone carried the false kindness of someone who believes they're being helpful. You might pick up some pointers. The table nodded in collective agreement, unaware that they were advising me to learn from myself. I stared at my untouched paella, the same recipe that food critics had declared revelatory just 2 weeks earlier at Willow and Time. I smiled, swallowing both my pride and the truth. Maybe I should. What they didn't know then, what none of them could possibly have suspected, was that their dismissals were only strengthening my resolve. Each criticism became fuel, each comparison a challenge. And as they continued to worship at the altar of Willow and Time while mocking my offerings, I was quietly planning something that would finally bring their tasteless judgment to a spectacular end. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold. Sometimes it's served with a perfect wine pairing and an unexpected revelation that leaves everyone at the table speechless. Willow and Time wasn't born from a desire for revenge. It existed long before I knew the Thompsons or their particularly ruthless brand of family dynamics. The restaurant was the culmination of a dream Natalie and I had nurtured since culinary school, a place where traditional techniques could meet unexpected flavors without pretension. I still remember the night we conceptualized it, sitting cross-legged on the floor of my tiny studio apartment, empty takeout containers scattered around us like casualties of our endless planning session. What if we created a place that felt like home, but served food that took people somewhere new? I'd suggested, sketching rough design ideas on the back of a pizza box. Natalie, with her sharp business acumen and marketing mind, immediately caught the vision. A culinary journey in a comfortable setting. Not intimidating, but not boring either. We worked opposite schedules for 2 years, saving every penny. Natalie handled PR for high-end hotels while I took private chef gigs for wealthy clients. Nights were dedicated to testing recipes and drafting business plans. We secured a small loan, found a location with good bones and bad wallpaper, and poured ourselves into renovation. The decision to keep my role anonymous wasn't part of the original plan. It evolved naturally after our soft opening, when a local food blogger recognized me from a charity event I'd catered. She asked for an interview about my journey from private chef to restaurateur. That night, Natalie and I stayed late, drinking wine from coffee mugs as we discussed the unexpected attention. What if, I said slowly, we keep my role quiet for now? You be the face, I'll be the force behind the scenes. Natalie tilted her head. You want me to take credit for your food? Not take credit. Just be the public face. Say we have an executive chef who prefers to remain anonymous. It happens in the industry. But why? She pressed. This is your dream too. I couldn't articulate it fully then. Part of it was practical. I was dating Jake by that point, and his family already showed signs of the judgment that would later become my daily bread. Part of it was personal. I'd always believed food should speak for itself, without the chef's personality overshadowing the experience. I just want to create without dealing with the spotlight, I explained. Let the food be the star. Let people focus on what's on the plate, not who put it there. Natalie reluctantly agreed, and our arrangement was born. She became the charming proprietor who greeted guests and gave interviews. I designed menus, trained staff, and created the recipes that would eventually earn us critical acclaim and a devoted following that included, ironically, my future in-laws. The restaurant took off faster than either of us anticipated. 6 months after opening, we had a waiting list 3 weeks long. Local magazines featured our signature dishes. Food critics praised our innovative approach to traditional ingredients. And through it all, I remained the unnamed talent behind the enterprise. Jake knew I worked in the culinary world. That much was impossible to hide. But he believed I was simply a line cook at an upscale hotel downtown, working odd hours while trying to find my footing in the industry. It wasn't a complete lie. I had worked there briefly before opening Willow and Thyme. I just never bothered to update my employment status. "I don't understand why you stay there," he would say sometimes, massaging my shoulders after a particularly long day. "You're so talented. You could be running your own kitchen somewhere." The irony of his words never failed to make me smile, even as I kept my secret locked away. "I'm where I need to be right now," I would reply, which was true enough. By the time Jake proposed, Willow and Thyme had expanded to a second location across town. My days were split between both restaurants, developing seasonal menus, training new chefs, and maintaining the quality that had become our hallmark. Natalie handled the business side with her characteristic efficiency, allowing me the creative freedom I craved. Our arrangement worked perfectly until it didn't. The first time Beverly mentioned dining at Willow and Thyme, my heart nearly stopped. She described my hamachi crudo in such detail that I could practically taste it myself. After all, I'd created the dish just weeks earlier, balancing the delicate fish with bright citrus and unexpected heat. "The woman is a genius," Beverly declared to the family table, unaware she was praising the very daughter-in-law whose cooking she dismissed as too acidic just moments before. That evening became the first of many surreal experiences. I would listen, fascinated and increasingly amused, as they dissected my professional creations with the same enthusiasm they used to criticize my home cooking. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. "The chef at Willow and Thyme understands balance," Beverly would say, pushing away a pasta dish I'd made. "This needs something." What it needed, apparently, was a higher price tag and the Willow and Thyme logo to make it palatable to her discriminating taste. As months passed, and their dismissal of my cooking continued alongside their worship of my restaurant, I found myself at a crossroads. I could reveal my secret and force them to acknowledge their hypocrisy. I could continue the charade indefinitely, drawing private satisfaction from their unwitting praise. Or I could find some middle path, a way to make them see me, truly see me, without burning bridges I'd still need to cross as part of this family. Natalie noticed my growing frustration one night as we reviewed plans for our third location. "You know," she said casually, "we could always invite them to a private tasting. The kind we do for VIPs and critics. Show them the kitchen, introduce them to the staff. And then what? Surprise. The chef you've been worshipping is the same woman whose meatloaf you called pedestrian last week." I laughed, but without humor. Natalie shrugged. "Sometimes people need a dramatic moment to see what's been in front of them all along." I dismissed the idea, initially. It felt petty, unnecessary. I was an adult with a successful business. Why did I need validation from people who clearly had their own issues with accepting outsiders? But then came the dinner that broke my resolve. The night I decided perhaps a little dramatic education was exactly what the Thompson family needed after all. The preparation for that fateful meal had begun 3 days in advance. I'd selected recipes I knew would impress, dishes that shared DNA with our most popular Willow and Thyme offerings but were adapted for home cooking. I'd sourced ingredients from the same premium suppliers we used at the restaurant. I'd even borrowed technique elements from the dishes Beverly had specifically praised during her visits. It was essentially Willow and Thyme brought to their home, the ultimate test of whether their disdain was about the food or about me. As the Thompsons picked at dishes that paying customers across town were simultaneously raving about, I realized this wasn't a battle I could win through culinary skill alone. This was about power, about hierarchy, about a family unwilling to expand their circle to include someone new. And that's when I decided, if they wouldn't accept me on their terms, perhaps they'd have no choice but to acknowledge me on mine. The evening began like any other Thompson family dinner, Beverly arranging and rearranging the table settings with military precision, Lauren complimenting her mother's every choice, Robert buried behind his newspaper until the exact moment he was expected to emerge and play the role of appreciative patriarch. Jake, caught between families as always, tried to help me in the kitchen while keeping an ear tuned to his mother's running commentary in the dining room. "Mom seems in a good mood tonight," he whispered optimistically as I put the finishing touches on the appetizer, a delicate scallop crudo with citrus, fennel, and a hint of Calabrian chili. The dish was practically identical to the one Beverly had recently described as transcendent at Willow and Thyme. "Let's hope it lasts," I replied, arranging the translucent slices of scallop in a perfect rosette. The presentation was impeccable, exactly as it would have been served at the restaurant. I'd even borrowed a set of our distinctive handmade ceramic plates to complete the illusion. Beverly's smile froze when I carried the platter into the dining room. "Oh," she said, her surprise poorly disguised as polite interest. "This looks ambitious." "It's just a simple crudo," I explained, setting the dish in the center of the table. "Scallops, citrus, a little heat. Nothing too complicated." Lauren peered at the arrangement with obvious skepticism. "It looks like something from a restaurant." "That's the idea," I replied with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Robert, finally lowering his newspaper, examined the dish with the cautious expression of someone being offered an unfamiliar street food in a foreign country. "Well, isn't this fancy?" They each took minimal portions, their forks hovering uncertainly over the arrangement as if expecting it to retaliate. Beverly was the first to take a bite, her expression carefully neutral as she chewed. "The scallops are a touch overcooked," she declared, though they were perfectly translucent and tender. "And there's something overwhelming about the flavor profile." Lauren, following her mother's lead, nodded in solemn agreement. "It's a bit much." I bit the inside of my cheek, thinking of the identical dish that had earned a rave review in the city's most prestigious food magazine just last month. "Too complex for a starter? Simple is usually best," Beverly advised, pushing her plate away with most of the serving untouched. "A nice soup would have been more appropriate." The main course fared no better. I prepared my signature dish from Willow and Thyme, a perfectly seared duck breast with a cherry port reduction, accompanied by a celery root puree and roasted seasonal vegetables. The dish that Beverly had tried, unsuccessfully, to recreate at home numerous times. As I carved the duck at the table, revealing the perfect medium-rare interior, Jake beamed with pride. "Emily outdid herself tonight," he announced. "This looks amazing, honey." Beverly's lips tightened as she accepted her portion. "It's certainly pink. It's meant to be served medium rare," I explained, knowing full well she understood this concept given her frequent visits to high-end restaurants. "The texture is better that way." Lauren prodded her duck with obvious reluctance. "I usually prefer my meat well done." "Since when?" Jake asked, his confusion genuine. "You ordered the duck at Willow and Thyme last month and raved about it." "That's different," Lauren replied quickly. "That chef knows what she's doing." The comment stung despite its unintentional comedy. I served myself a portion and took a bite, confirming what I already knew. The dish was executed perfectly, identical to what we served at the restaurant. "The sauce is very sweet," Beverly commented after taking the smallest possible bite. "And the meat is terribly underdone for my taste." Robert, at least, made a show of eating a few bites before setting down his fork. "It's an interesting attempt, Emily. Very creative." By the time dessert arrived, a chocolate souffle with salted caramel center, the very recipe Beverly had tried to charm out of our staff, I was no longer surprised when they each found something to criticize. Too sweet, too bitter, undercooked, overworked. I sat in silence, watching as they dissected my professional creations with the same casual cruelty they'd always shown toward my cooking. The absurdity of the situation might have been comical if it weren't so painfully revealing of deeper issues. Jake, bless him, kept trying to salvage the evening, praising each dish with increasing enthusiasm as his family's criticism mounted. His support, while touching, only highlighted the unified front I was facing alone. "I don't understand," he said finally, frustration evident in his voice. "This is amazing food. Why can't you just enjoy it?" Beverly patted his hand condescendingly. Everyone has different tastes, dear. We're simply more accustomed to traditional preparations. Traditional like willow and thyme? I couldn't help asking, my tone innocently curious despite the challenge underlying the words. The mention of the restaurant immediately brightened the atmosphere, as if I'd invoked a beloved family member. Now that's proper cooking, Beverly said, her entire demeanor changing. The chef there understands balance and restraint, even while being innovative. Lauren nodded enthusiastically. Remember that duck dish we had last time? With the cherry sauce? It was perfect. I stared at my plate, at the identical duck preparation they had just criticized, fighting the urge to point out the obvious. No offense, Emily, Lauren continued, apparently emboldened by the change in conversation, but you should really take a cooking class. Maybe something basic to start with. The suggestion hung in the air like a slap. I looked around the table, at the barely touched gourmet meal I'd spent days preparing, dishes that people across town were paying premium prices to enjoy at that very moment. Then came the final blow. I have an idea, Robert said, reaching for his phone. Why don't we order some takeout from Willow and Thyme? I think they do delivery through that new app. Perfect, Beverly exclaimed. Now that's food made by real chefs. The room seemed to tilt slightly as I processed the sheer audacity of the suggestion. They wanted to order takeout from my restaurant while my food, the exact same food, sat untouched on their plates. Jake looked mortified. Dad, that's incredibly rude. Emily spent all day cooking for us. It's just a suggestion, Robert defended weakly. We're still hungry, and we know everyone enjoys their food. I could have revealed everything in that moment. The words were there, balanced on the tip of my tongue like a perfect seasoning ready to transform the entire experience. I could have watched their expressions shift from condescension to shock to embarrassment. Instead, I smiled, a real smile, fueled by the sudden clarity of what needed to happen next. What a wonderful idea, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Why don't you go ahead and order? I think I've lost my appetite anyway. As Robert fumbled with the delivery app, I caught Jake's concerned gaze across the table and gave him a subtle wink. My husband looked confused, but seemed to sense that I wasn't as defeated as I appeared. Little did the Thompsons know, their casual cruelty had just set the stage for a reveal that would change our family dynamic forever. As they eagerly awaited their delivery from the restaurant they thought I could never measure up to, I silently began planning their education in both culinary appreciation and basic human decency. Sometimes, revenge is a dish best served by professionals, especially when you happen to be that professional. 3 days after the disastrous dinner, my phone lit up with a text from Natalie. Planning the spring tasting event. Press, influencers, the usual suspects. You in. Our quarterly tasting events had become a cornerstone of Willow and Thyme's marketing strategy. Invitation-only affairs where we debuted new menu items, gave food bloggers their Instagram moments, and generated buzz that kept our reservation books filled for months. I stared at the message, the humiliation of the family dinner still fresh in my mind. Beverly's dismissive comments. Lauren's condescending suggestion that I take cooking classes. Robert's stunning suggestion to order takeout from my own restaurant while my food sat untouched. I'm in, I typed back. And I want to add some names to the guest list. Anyone interesting? Natalie replied almost immediately. The Thompsons. All of them. There was a long pause before Natalie's response appeared. Your in-laws? The ones who've been driving you crazy? Are you sure that's wise? Absolutely not, I admitted. But it's necessary. That evening, as Jake and I prepared dinner together, I realized how much I'd kept from him. Not just about Willow and Thyme, but about how deeply his family's rejection had affected me. Jake, I began, setting down my knife. There's something I need to tell you. Something important. He looked up from the chicken he was seasoning, immediately concerned. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, exactly. It's just, I haven't been completely honest about my work. His brow furrowed. Your work? At the hotel? I don't work at the hotel. I haven't for years. The words tumbled out faster now. I co-own Willow and Thyme with Natalie. I'm the executive chef. All those dishes your family raves about? They're mine. All of them. Jake froze, chicken forgotten. You what? I explained everything. How Natalie and I had started the restaurant before I met him, how we decided I would remain anonymous, how surreal it had been to hear his family simultaneously worship my professional cooking while dismissing my personal efforts. When I finished, Jake was silent for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, he started laughing. Not a chuckle, but deep, shoulder-shaking laughter that eventually had him leaning against the counter for support. I'm sorry, he managed between gasps for air. It's just, my mother has been trying to recreate your recipes for months. She called the restaurant 3 times to ask about the duck sauce. The absurdity hit me then too, and soon we were both laughing, years of secrets melting away. Why didn't you tell me? He asked finally, wiping tears from his eyes. At first, it wasn't relevant. Then, when I met your family, I shrugged. It became complicated. I didn't want to use it as some kind of trump card. I wanted them to accept me for me, not because I had a successful restaurant. Jake's expression sobered. They've been awful to you. I knew it, but I didn't realize the extent. They're your family. You love them. I touched his cheek. But they need to respect me. Not as a chef, but as a person. As your wife. He nodded slowly. So, what are you planning to do? We're hosting a private tasting event next week. I've added your family to the guest list. I held his gaze. I think it's time they knew who's been feeding them all this time. Jake was quiet for a moment, then a slow smile spread across his face. Can I be there? I want to see my mother's face when she realizes. Absolutely, I promised. Front row seat. The formal invitation arrived at the Thompson household the next day, addressed from Willow and Time's official PR department. An exclusive invitation to a VIP tasting event featuring new spring menu items, hosted by the executive chef. The exact kind of exclusive access Beverly had been trying to secure for months. Jake reported that his mother called him immediately, her voice pitched high with excitement. We got into Willow and Time's VIP tasting, she practically squealed. The executive chef will be there personally presenting the dishes. It says the guest list is extremely limited. We must have been recognized as loyal customers. That's amazing, Mom, Jake replied, trying to keep the amusement out of his voice. What a special opportunity. I'm going to ask about that chocolate souffle, she continued. The chef is a culinary genius. Maybe I can finally get some pointers. The night of the tasting, I arrived at the restaurant hours early, checking every detail. The menu was a greatest hits collection of my most popular creations, including the duck with cherry pour reduction and the chocolate souffle with salted caramel center that Beverly had tried unsuccessfully to recreate. Natalie found me in the kitchen, tasting sauces and making minute adjustments. Are you nervous? She asked, hopping up to sit on a prep table. Strangely, no.
And it was true.
The anxiety I'd anticipated had been replaced with calm certainty. This wasn't about proving myself anymore. It was about claiming my place, both professionally and personally. I just want this over with, one way or another. As service time approached, I changed into my chef's whites, the fabric crisp against my skin. I rarely wore the full uniform, preferring more practical attire for kitchen work. But tonight called for the traditional chef's coat, my name embroidered in simple script, Emily Thompson, executive chef. Jake arrived early, giving me a reassuring kiss before taking his position at the reserved table. They're on their way, he confirmed. Mom's been talking about nothing else for days. I nodded, suddenly unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Whatever happened next would change everything, for better or worse. The Thompsons arrived precisely on time, Beverly leading the procession with the air of someone granted access to a royal coronation. Lauren and Robert followed, all 3 dressed in their finest, eyes wide as they took in the elegant private dining room. Through the kitchen pass, I watched as Natalie greeted them warmly, explaining the format of the evening. Each course would be presented personally by the chef, with an explanation of the inspiration and techniques involved. The chef has been particularly excited to meet you, I heard Natalie say. Apparently you're some of our most loyal customers. Beverly practically glowed with pride. We've tried almost everything on the menu. The chef here is truly exceptional. I'm sure she'll be delighted to hear that, Natalie replied, catching my eye with a barely suppressed smile. As the Thompsons were seated, coincidentally right next to Jake, who greeted them with an innocence that deserved an award, I took a deep breath and nodded to my team. It was time for them to finally meet the chef behind their favorite meals, and for me to step out of the shadows and into the light. The dining room hushed as I pushed through the swinging doors, for servers following behind me with the main course elegantly plated on our signature stoneware. The soft lighting caught the glaze on the duck breast, making it gleam like polished mahogany. The aroma of the cherry port reduction filled the intimate space, rich and inviting. I approached the Thompson table first, professional smile in place, as I surveyed their expectant faces. None of them recognized me immediately. In my chef's whites, hair pulled back in a neat bun, standing tall with the confidence that comes from being in my element, I must have looked like a stranger. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady despite the racing of my heart. "I'm delighted to present our signature dish, honey-lacquered duck breast with cherry port reduction, celery root puree, and seasonal vegetables." Beverly leaned forward eagerly, her eyes fixed on the plate rather than my face. "It looks magnificent. We've had this dish before, but I'm sure tonight's preparation will be even more special." "I certainly hope so," I replied, signaling for the servers to place the plates before each guest. "I've taken particular care with this service." As the servers stepped back, I remained standing at the head of the table. This was the moment I'd been simultaneously dreading and anticipating for years. "Before you begin," I continued, "I wanted to personally thank you for your patronage. I understand you're among our most loyal customers." Beverly preened at the recognition. "We simply adore everything you create. Your vision is unparalleled." Lauren nodded enthusiastically. "We talk about your cooking all the time." "So I've heard," I said, the corner of my mouth lifting slightly. Beside them, Jake was having a hard time keeping his expression neutral. I took a breath, then removed the traditional tall chef's hat I'd worn specifically for this dramatic moment, allowing my full face to be visible in the candlelight. "I'm Emily," I said simply, looking each of them in the eye. "Co-owner and executive chef here at Willow and Thyme. Every dish you've enjoyed tonight, indeed, every dish you've ever enjoyed here, was created by me, from scratch." The tableau before me froze into a perfect moment of recognition and shock. Beverly's fork, halfway to her mouth, stopped midair. Lauren's eyes widened to an almost comical degree. Robert's expressions cycled rapidly through confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror. "Emily," Beverly finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Our Emily?" "The very same," I confirmed, maintaining my professional demeanor. "Jake's wife. Your daughter-in-law. The one whose cooking you've been critiquing every Sunday for the past 2 years." Lauren's gaze darted between me and the plate before her, as if trying to reconcile the food she'd been praising with the person she'd been dismissing. "But how? You never said. You never asked," I pointed out gently. "You were too busy telling me what was wrong with my cooking to ever consider that I might actually know what I was doing." Robert cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Now, Emily, there seems to be some misunderstanding here. Is there?" I asked, my voice still calm, but carrying an edge that silenced him immediately. "For 2 years, I've watched you praise my professional cooking while criticizing identical dishes in your home. Last week, you suggested ordering takeout from my restaurant while my food sat untouched on your plates." The table fell silent. Around us, other guests continued with their tastings, oblivious to the family drama unfolding in our corner of the room. Jake reached over and took my hand, a public show of support that meant more than he could know. "The duck you're about to eat," he told his family, "is exactly the same dish Emily served last Sunday. The one you said was terribly underdone and had sauce that was very sweet." Beverly's face had lost all color, her composure crumbling as the implications of the evening sank in. "I don't understand why you wouldn't tell us," she said finally, her voice small. "Why keep this secret?" "At first, it wasn't a secret, just a professional choice I made before I even met Jake. Many chefs prefer anonymity. I adjusted my chef's coat, the confidence of being in my element giving me strength. But after I joined your family, after I saw how you treated my cooking at home, I became curious. Would you judge my food differently if you didn't know I made it? Turns out you did. Lauren looked down at her plate, shame coloring her cheeks. The souffle you made last week, the one I said was overworked, is the exact recipe we serve here. I confirmed. The one your mother has tried to recreate 3 times. Robert, always quicker to recover than the women in his family, attempted damage control. Well, this is certainly illuminating. You've built quite an impressive business here, Emily. We had no idea. Clearly, I replied, allowing a small smile. Around us, the other diners were finishing their main courses, the soft murmur of appreciation a stark contrast to the tense silence at our table. My staff moved efficiently through the room, refilling water glasses and answering questions from other guests. I should check on the kitchen, I said, preparing to step away. Please, enjoy your meal. The duck is best enjoyed while it's warm. And I assure you, it's meant to be served medium rare. Beverly's hand shot out, catching my wrist. Emily, wait. Her voice trembled slightly, her usual composure completely undone. I don't know what to say. I could see genuine distress in her eyes, the careful facade of perfection she maintained now cracked beyond repair. In that moment, I felt a surprising wave of compassion for this woman who had judged me so harshly for so long. You don't need to say anything right now, I told her gently. Just taste the food. Really taste it this time. Without preconceptions about who made it or whether it fits your idea of what cooking should be. I gestured to the plates before them, still untouched in the wake of my revelation. This is who I am. This is what I create. Whether it's served here or at your dining table, it's the same expression of my passion and skill. Lauren picked up her fork first, cutting a small piece of duck and bringing it to her mouth. Her eyes widened as she chewed, as if tasting it for the first time. It's incredible, she admitted quietly. Robert followed suit, then finally Beverly. The Thompson matriarch closed her eyes as she savored the bite, and when she opened them again, they glistened with unshed tears. I've been a fool, she whispered. I shook my head.
No.
You've been human. We all have preconceptions that cloud our judgment. I straightened my shoulders, chef's pride returning. But now you know. So the question is, where do we go from here? The question hung in the air between us, unanswered for the moment. But as I turned to head back to my kitchen, I caught Jake's proud smile, Natalie's subtle thumbs up from across the room, and felt a weight lifting from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. They knew now. The secret was out. Whether this revelation would heal the rift in our family or widen it permanently remained to be seen. But for the first time since joining the Thompson family, I felt truly seen, not as the outsider trying to fit in, but as exactly who I was, a chef who had earned her place both in the culinary world and at their table.